This is I think all of you previewed it, right? Yeah. Oh, so all of us saw a 73-minute cut of this, and this was 60 minutes, so 13 minutes were cut out. I didn't recognize anything that was missing. I thought, the 60-minute version accomplished just as much as the 73, and I was thrilled that they left in the part about the talk show. That was my favorite part of the film.
About the
where he was with the guy who Tone comes out on this woman's talk show, and her expressions were just like, that was worth the price of admission. That was awesome.
Was she surprised or something?
I guess she was pretty shocked. That I enjoyed, and I also enjoyed the quote where the woman said, where they were having the celebration for his coming out of his wrapping up his military career, and the one woman said, let's see if I get this right, God don't make lesbian, period.
Well, I think I'd like to follow up on your comment about her being surprised. I think what we've seen in the history of gay rights is the expectation is for there to be this self-loathing that gay people have, that we should be ashamed of it. So when someone says that, we should explain it or should, apologize for it. And I think Tone's openness, caught her off guard. I think that's what it is. And if you contrast that with Prop 8, when Prop 8 happened, it's like gays hid. They didn't want to present themselves. They tried to, frame it in all these abstract ways. But for the Maryland case, you had people really going out and outreaching in the community, and I think that's just amazing. And so when Tone spoke up, he said, "This is, unapologetically, this is where I am," and so she didn't know how to react to it. And I think that's the way we need to approach it. I think that's why things are advancing so quickly.
I have to say, until I saw this film, I had no idea that. I had heard about what the evangelical churches were doing in Africa to drive the agenda in places like Uganda, where it is punishable by death, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I read something recently where 170 countries in the world have laws that punish homosexuality with imprisonment, death, or something. Like, oh my God, that's like an amazing number. So I had heard that there was a major movement in Africa to make this a wedge issue, and which Ugandans did not have a problem beforehand. They were completely accepting, and then all of a sudden, the evangelical church comes in and starts to convince people that there's something to be worried about. So that was in and of itself shocking to me, but I had no idea the scope to which it was going on in this country.
Well, the white Christian church is manipulated and bamboozled for a long time. One thing being that the slaves were to be happy to serve their master and be content and to believe in God. So there you have the whole Christian methodology of convincing people of things that may or may not be true. And I don't know if you've read Raphael Warnock's book, The Divided Mind of the Black Church, Theology, Piety, and Public Witness, but he makes some really interesting points about this, where slavery was in the Bible. So it's a good thing. Only the Quakers were protesting, and a few Methodists there for a little while. He didn't mention the Unitarians, so I don't know what the history is there, but the church has been a voice to command for various norms. Are we manipulating the black church? What's the black church versus the white church? Was Jesus black? I mean, there are lots of really fantastic questions that aren't brought up here, but certainly are worth pursuing and considering the theology. And we've got the issue of the church for the people, the church for the academicians. You know, black theology came along in the 60s, trying to, let's make this so that the other pastors will understand us and take us seriously, leaving some of the people in the dust. But I know struggle with Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X, and the Black Power, the more radical street people saying the church has to have meaning for us too. So there are many, 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 many questions. The one piece that was cut from this was one of the ministers talking about where in the Bible voices were heard, not so much against, not so much about gays and lesbians, but about truths that people don't realize, that we keep perpetuating myths. It says in the Bible there are no, God don't make no lesbians. Well, okay, so we're all mistakes. What's going on here? So
Does the word lesbian even appear in the Bible?
Well, who was that? Ruth, and then there was John, and there were some people, there were some folks. Those parts don't get publicized as much and explained. I'm not a scholar in the biblical sense, so I can't quote them, but I think that as we research more and more, you're going to find in the Bible what you want to find. That's the mystery of it.
And the convenience of it.
Well, you're right. The convenience.
It fits all needs.
But I love the kid the foster child and finds love with the foster mother, that they find the love that they assumed was not there. So who changed first, the kid or the foster mom?
However, that was the one scene I found most disturbing, because the foster, not child anymore, but the foster individual says, I did not choose this. I was born this way. I've felt this way since I was 4. Did you say that? And, that was kind of a mindset that I personally operated with. Whenever I would explain myself to someone, this isn't something I chose. I was, who would choose, to be persecuted and so forth? Until somebody at Outright Vermont said to me, and what if you did choose it? Should it be wrong if it was your choice to love a person of the same sex? And at that point, that really lit a light bulb in my head, why are we, some of us anyway, kind of apologizing by saying, it wasn't my choice. I know it's a lesser lifestyle, or it's a, aberrant lifestyle, but I didn't choose it. It chose me. And that was kind of like, whoa, he's right. I shouldn't have to explain myself. Whether I chose it or not shouldn't matter. So that was one thing that kind of disturbed me a little in that scene.
Oh yeah, that's I think very true, because you hear that I was born black, and because if it's a choice, it seems to me that would mean if you could correct it, then people would say, you could correct it. Well, with modern science now, it is possible for us to bleach skin. It is possible for us to have gene, modification and stuff. So I think it's a real dangerous thing when we talk about if it's a choice, or even being born that way. Whether it's a choice or being born should be irrelevant to the discussion, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's ever conducted a poll of self-identified LGBTQ people to say, did you choose it or were you born this way? To see what the majority would say. But, speaking for myself, up until I had that revelatory moment, I would have said, I was born this way. But it's just interesting how living in the climate we live in, whether it's, our particular town, our state, our nation, it really does shape you in so many ways that you can't even begin to comprehend. I feel very fortunate to be a resident of Montpelier, a town that's accepting, a resident of Vermont, a state that's accepting and progressive. And slowly, certainly our nation is coming along, state by state, slowly, way luckier than if I lived in many other places in the world. And I can assure you that if I did live in Uganda, or was born in one of those 170 countries, I would so not be out. I would be like, okay, I'll live a heterosexual lifestyle because I don't want to go to jail and I don't want to end up in dead or have a rock or worse come through my window. And I feel just so fortunate to be able to be as open as I am, because I know very well that I don't have the constitution to be one of those people. And I'm amazed at when we hear the civil rights stories, the freedom riders and the lunch counter sitters and the people who walked across bridges and had the dogs and the fire hoses. I'm like, oh my God, this is courage at its, most amazing levels.
Well, there's 170 countries you're not going to go visit.
Well, without knowing, I don't know the laws of all the countries I've visited. Maybe some of them are pretty. Mostly, I haven't exactly traveled much, but
Yeah, but it depends on the tourist spots. Anything goes. So the laws are probably not going to prevail in that. It's all depends on which side of
It
the
all depends.
I do
on
remember-
which side of the buck you're passing, right?
I do remember being very disappointed
Step on.
Right.
to learn about Bermuda. I always thought, wow, Bermuda sounds like this really great place to go to. But then I heard that they have very conservative views when it comes to sexual orientation. And I thought, I don't feel so excited about going there anymore.
Isn't it still a colony?
No, it's
It's not
been
independent, is it?
independent country since about 1961.
I don't know, but I just thought, well, I can't go there with my spouse and walk down the street holding hands. What would happen? Would we be deported or arrested? I don't know. I just so much anxiety, so I no longer desire to go to Bermuda. Did you know that even in this country, my partner and I, my spouse and I, could not join the Peace Corps and be assigned together like any straight couple could, because there are so many countries where the Peace Corps works that have conservative policies in place, and that would not be acceptable to the receiving country. So that's not a possibility for me, and it's something I've always wanted to do. So we make progress, and yet it seems like there's so much that needs to be done.
I just want to comment on what you've been saying, talking about the countries where have bans on homosexuality and so forth. I think one of the problems is that that hasn't really been communicated. You hear on the news about the kidnapped girls in Nigeria, but they're not really saying anything about how gay people are being treated over there. Same thing with Russia and their seizure of Crimea. They're not talking about how gay people are being treated over there, propaganda laws and so forth. And even over here, there's an ignorance of the gay rights movement and what gay people have gone through over the decades. A lot of people see it as just about marriage, just about people wanting to get married. But if you look at Lawrence versus Texas, which I think is another thing, because a lot of black people think, well, we went through something different, and gay people just, this is about sin and all this. But I think one commonality is, in the case of the Loving versus Virginia, they were arrested in their bedroom. And in Lawrence versus Texas, the two guys,
Right.
they were arrested in their bedroom having sex. And so I think what people should be doing is, this is a privacy issue, this is about personal choices, this is about people, this is about the government coming in, interfering in your life with your private decisions, telling you whether you should vote, whether you should get married, whether you have the right to have sex however you want, and all these things. And then, as I said, the larger gay rights movement, there's a lot of stuff that happened that people just aren't aware of, and the leaders of like Gay Inc. Tend to be staffed by people of privilege, generally white men, who haven't really experienced any discrimination, and it seems like they haven't really educated themselves on what has happened over the years. Because it's pretty horrific. Even here in America, maybe not as bad as Nigeria, but it's been pretty horrific. And I think if that was just really communicated more, I think more people would be understanding.
One thing that I found encouraging is I was preparing for a service that we had at the Unitarian Church. It was going to be it was held on March 30th, a worship service, and it was the first ever service at that church dedicated solely to LGBTQ concerns and issues. The church, for decades, has been welcoming to the LGBTQ community, but and a lot of Unitarians have the attitude that, well, we're welcoming. What do we have to do? But the problem is that a lot of people on the outside don't see any signs. They see a big white monolithic church. Well, what tells me if I'm just walking by that this is a place that will welcome me? So there's this initiative where we try to say to the church, hey, we may be welcoming, but we can do a lot more to let the outside world know that we're welcoming, and we can do a lot more internally to be more welcoming. And so to prepare for what I was going to say at the service, I was starting to clip newspaper articles because I was going to talk about challenges and concerns in the present, how we're moving forward, how we're moving back. And I was thrilled. Like every day, I'd open the Times-Argus, the local paper here, and there'd be 1, 2, or 3 articles about gay something or other in some state in the nation or in some place, the Ivory Coast, what's going on with Sochi, Michigan. And I would just clip, and I created my remarks based on, several weeks worth of material. So I was really excited that the history is horrific, but I think we've come a long way in terms of press coverage, even getting mentioned in the press, which once upon a time was, you'd never see it discussed.
Then when it was published, it was usually pretty awful stuff, like
just the bad side.
Gay sex clubs.
Yeah.
Like that's how they're calling about a cheating, like secret gay sex group or whatever.
Perversions.
Yeah.
Focus on perversion. Yeah, it's true.
Do you have a question or comment?
I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of things. I guess I think a lot of our media. I think we need to read our media critically when they talk about the gay issues, because a lot of times it's used as a prop for as a segue for the State Department's interests. So if they want to bash Russia, they'll talk about gay rights. But then if they if it's a country that may be even worse, but is an ally of the United States, they won't talk about it at all. So you really need to dig and to find out what's going on around the world to get a really accurate picture. And you mentioned Uganda executes gays, and the United States is actually one of the few countries that still has the death penalty. And there was that awful case in Oklahoma recently where they botched an execution because they are using drugs that they're not disclosing, the drug cocktails that they're using for these executions, because any reputable medical establishment will not sell these states that want to conduct executions, saying that they actually believe in the Hippocratic Oath. So they won't sell these things, and they have to, I don't know how they get their hands on these drugs. But regarding the film, I think that my favorite part was where they were talking, the activists were kind of sitting around having a little bit of a round table, and somebody said voters don't consider gay marriage their most important issue. They're more interested in like these bread and butter issues. And one of the other women at the table responded by saying, you know, in Montgomery, you know, sitting at the back of the bus wasn't the most important issue for people then either, but it was symbolic of something that's much more fundamental about our society. And so it's just kind of like, that's like the flagship cause, but there's so much more behind it. And I think that up until that, I think that they even said in the movie that Maryland vote is the first time that people actually voted for gay marriage. And before that, it was always court rulings. And a lot of the gay rights movement was very legalistically oriented towards trying to win these court battles. And I think that, but ultimately, if it's going to be a, you know, if you're going to if you win the legal victory, but not the hearts and minds of the people, it's still kind of a pirate victory. You're still, you know, you might be able to be married, but are you going to live together? Is your community going to accept you? You know, are your neighbors going to accept you? Are you going to be able to go to your church together? You know, what's the value of marriage? It's symbolic for all these other things. And so actually doing all that hard work, and they showed all that like door knocking and conversations and you know, family settings and all that work leading up to that victory. I think it signifies a much deeper victory, a much more of a deeper social change in society.
Well, you have episodes like Penn State. That doesn't help with the coach, the football.
Oh, yeah, Sandusky.
So, yes, Sandusky, that type. You know, that just doesn't help the cause. You know.
Oh, mistaking pedophilia for
Pedophilia,
homosexuality? Yes, that is a
Yes.
big problem.
That's,
People
exactly.
need to understand.
That's a better way of saying.
There's a
yes.
huge difference.
Yes, yes.
But how I think we do that, how we distinguish that difference is by being out and presenting ourselves in public, because what we've kind of failed to do in the past, like when the Family Values campaign came on, we went along with their rhetoric and we let the other side kind of frame it. So when people say, you know, oh, you know, Sam Sandusky, he's this, and that's what gay people are doing, they're recruiting
Yeah,
children,
yeah.
we find ourselves on the defensive. It's like, well, wait a minute, we have values, we have religion, we have, you know, morals, and I think that's what we saw in the film. I mean, you can argue the gay issue on different levels. Like, the one, religion really shouldn't play a role in it because it's a civil rights, it's a, you know, legal issue, a secular issue, but that doesn't do you any good if the conversation for the voters is on a religious level. And so what we saw in the film, I thought it was interesting that you had, churches giving their anti-gay rhetoric, but also you had other churches saying, wait a minute, you're saying God's this, well, my God is okay with this, or, you know, and so I think we kind of have to present ourselves in that way. So when people go to the polls, they aren't thinking of Sam Sandusky, they're thinking of their neighbor Jim, who is a good guy, he supports his family, he goes to work, he doesn't do drugs, you know, etc. You know.
I'm from Maryland.
Oh, yay!
Yes, but we would have voted
Did you vote in
for it.
2012?
Yeah.
I want to say that there's been a long history of activists navigating the issue of racism. Early on, when there were some initiatives around gay rights, they didn't go so well, primarily because people did use the rhetoric that it's like slavery. And many people took umbrage. The folks in the black churches and in the black communities were like, hold it. Let's hear a much more nuanced analysis of what you understand slavery and racism to be as a system of oppression in this country. And so initiatives were lost, but it really did, as that woman was saying, start the conversation, and extraordinary work was done and cross-communication occurred so that then initiatives were passed. And the rhetoric that the activists used would not be around, this is just like slavery. Well, you know, if it was a privileged middle-class person who knew nothing about what that that practice, what that system meant to just, well, obviously, throngs of families and individuals, and is obviously still ongoing. So it was really wonderful to see this, first of all, to see a film that did not have lots of white people talking, and that also had some of the same conversations sort of hovering, not wanting the church, certain churches, to be overtaken by certain conversations, when beneath it were much more subtle issues coming up. So I thought it was great. I was very proud of you. And but also I loved Toné, and I loved when the pastor in one of the churches came out and talked to a bunch of other pastors, and he said, "Look, are we going to be churches of inclusion or exclusion?" I don't know. I felt very tense when this movie started, though. So that was very heartening to see.
Yeah.
I love what you said about the conversation, having the conversation with African Americans, because I think it's true. We sometimes start the conversation with, "This is like slavery," or "This is why you should do this," without that initial thing was, "Well, what do you think this is? What is your opinion of the civil rights? What is your," get that common ground out,
Yeah.
and find out what their thoughts are first before we assume to tell them what they should think or not think.
Baltimore is very interesting in terms of the activist communities. There were a lot of social activist communities that would want to do a lot of organizing around churches. But it was sort of, how do we bring them to our gatherings? But in primarily the women's community and the lesbian community, there was a very sweet clarity around collaboration from groups. So there were lots of African American lesbian groups and some various colored other groups, and folks would come together for events rather than requiring shared membership. So there was a kind of local, shall we say, local vor quality to activism there. It's a small, Baltimore in particular is a city that has lots and lots of ethnic communities, and I think the activist communities echo that.
One point I think is really beautiful is the heterosexual woman who takes charge of the initiative, and her husband's the retired Air Force guy. That whole, and those family conversations, but that the heterosexuals were part of the initiative was really a beautiful thing for me. I think the quote that equality never hurt anyone is also something I want a bumper sticker that says that. But I'm concerned that it's easy for us in Vermont to think we've got it. I teach race and racism at the University of Vermont, and they say, "Well, racism doesn't exist here." And I say, "Well, hang in. We're gonna just talk to me at Thanksgiving about what you think about that." But but they want to believe that it does not exist anymore, and this is across the country. People don't want racism to be real anymore. However, we know too well that it is. So the combination.
I'll introduce you to a few people.
Yeah, right, exactly. Some of my best
Odd
friends.
conversations that I've had where I go looking for the exit.
Well,
There's some people you just can't change their minds.
I've given up on the minds. I'm going for the hearts now. Let's go for the hearts, that everybody's got to work together. But I'm concerned that the gay community has not recognized the intersectionality of their issues and oppression. So there's a ton of education to do on everybody's part within. I'm not comfortable with the oppression Olympics where, I'm black, I'm more oppressed than you are, or I'm gay, I'm more oppressed than you are. Everybody's suffering, and everybody's got to come together and figure out how to work together to clarify what's best for everybody. So that's my hope for the next 4 years.
But I don't know, I'm thinking about the churches in this film. There's a poll, right? It came out with the idea that Vermont was the most secular state in the Union. I mean, I have no idea what questions they were asking or how they figured that out, so maybe a totally invalid poll. But you look at the black churches in PG County, and I don't know where that exists here. When you think of the churches in Montpelier, they are really pathetic. You want to start something, don't start with the churches. There isn't any muscle there, there isn't any fever there, there isn't anything there that you could build a movement on.
Say a little bit more about that when you say they're pathetic.
They sure don't know how to dress up and go to church, that's for sure.
Right.
I mean, well, I don't know. Right next door, right? The Methodist Church, right? Sorry to say this, but I'm a member over there. They're headed. We'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, no, it's a serious question. I mean, are you talking about their weakening in terms of attendance, or they don't have quote balls to take on issues, or like what do you mean?
Yes.
Both.
Yes. There's a general, for me, it's a general undermining of the spiritual nature that holds for a time and a place and a ritual that acknowledges a creator, it's like people can't get dressed up. There's no special occasions. It's kind of it becomes so secular that there's nothing special.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the specialness of this day or this time?
Yeah.
It kind of gets gray.
Well, I'll tell you, speaking again strictly from a Unitarian perspective, because that's the church that I go to.
Yes.
I'm there pretty much every Sunday, and I pretty much wear Carhartts or jeans every Sunday, so I don't get dressed up.
Won't be Nancy being the fashion.
No.
However, asterisk, for the last 3 or 4 years, I have led the movement that on Easter Sunday, we all, the men and the women, wear Easter bonnets. And it's a little bit flippant, but it's actually, the church has really embraced it. And so, there's a nod, there's sort of a little bit of a nod to a tradition, but it's also been turned into a community thing, like people are into it. Which is not to say that we're embracing anything about the tradition of Easter in the sense of the resurrection and all that. We don't, or I should say we. The problem with saying we with Unitarians is you can be Unitarian and Buddhist, Unitarian and atheist, Unitarian and Orthodox Jew. I think you can be Unitarian almost anything, which is what I love about it. We draw from all the traditions of the main religious traditions. So while externally I don't appear to view the building or the worship service in a special way, I can assure you that I do, because it's what's said in that building and what's done by the people who come there and their character that is special to me, and their activism. That church was the place, after Beth Robinson argued before the Supreme Court in Vermont in the Baker decision, that's where the gay community gathered to meet and hear how the arguments went and watch a video. The minister at that time, when civil unions were being debated, was over at the State House, signed up, ready to testify if she was called. It would be like one from the opposition, one from the supporters, and you did or didn't get a chance to testify. But our minister was very publicly over there in support, wearing the sticker. There's a rainbow flag now that's on the outside of that church every Sunday morning.
See it.
And there's a rainbow rectangle that's a permanent piece of the church facade now. So I would say, and from a standpoint of just forget about the whole gay issues, just outreach in general, I could do a mini laundry list of the ways in which our church is active in the community. So, and I think we're growing in size. So I think the other 13 churches in Montpelier might have issues around attendance and maybe kind of wishy-washy, loosey-goosey, but I would not put the Unitarian Church in that class.
What do you think it has influence among its congregation? Because I think that's what, if I understood right, your point. One of the things the film kind of mentioned, brought up two things. They mentioned the Mormon Church early on with putting money in the Prop 8. Well, the reason why that gets significant is, and if there's Mormons here, I apologize if I'm speaking from ignorance, but my understanding of a lot of the Mormon Church is that a lot of the members will vote how the upper leaders say. You know, you vote this way and you follow that way. And it, the film also emphasized how you take a person from the African American community that's called boy or Jim in daily life.
Right.
They're, you know, here at church, they're somebody. They all have roles, and the church influences the congregation. I mean, the pastor's words are only going to have effect if people take them seriously and are going to follow suit. Well, so in Montpelier, I guess, could that be the case? Would the person have that kind of influence where literally if the pastor says you need to vote against this amendment or you need to vote for this amendment, everybody would be like, well, yeah, we need to do that?
No, that would not happen because the minister is not on high in a Unitarian church. The minister is chosen. It's the congregation votes. We want this person, we don't want this person. It's not somebody that the denomination installs there. We pick our ministers, and that's true throughout the denomination. And we also don't have a creed, so it's not a case of this is what you will believe because the minister says it or because the denomination says it.
Well, this is what the black church was saying. Don't say, you know, we're being told to do everything because we have minds of our own. I mean, I think that's what are the points of the movie. But another point I would say is that, you know, people of color dress up to be respectful to themselves and to everybody else. It's white privilege that allows blue jeans in the workplace. And an assumed, you know, they don't have to worry about getting fired for not coming to work appropriately dressed. I mean, we've lost a lot of these traditions in a casual approach to being in a community. I'm not.
Well, it's power. It's related to power.
Sure,
too.
exactly.
Because have you ever seen the play Crowns with the hats?
I haven't.
Yeah, the arena stage in Washington did it.
D.C. Yeah, it's very popular. Well, okay, so hats and the symbolic the use of hats by women was a power symbolic of women having power. Wearing hats, and it was a play about that, basically, in the black churches.
Was there a remark in the back? Were you going to say something?
I was interested in your comment about churches here, and I was also in the comment, I'm sorry, I called him.
Oh, JD.
That the church as a location of social safety is different. In Vermont, I don't think, if the church, if UU becomes a bastion, a refuge for folks who feel marginalized in some way, then it may develop the kind of power you were just talking about, where you have muscle to affect change in other ways. But the way they described what the church held, even though it was a spiritual and religious tradition that was foisted at some point on a lot of folks, the plantation owners, it was a place where coming together to really have a place of safety was critical. So I think you're absolutely right. It has a different feel because it has a different origin.
I think the Methodist churches are regarding lesbian, gay community is changing slowly. You've had all kinds of cases in the Methodist Church. You've had the Episcopal bishop being gay.
Are they called more light churches?
Pardon?
Are they called more light churches in the Methodist tradition when they're supportive of gay and lesbian? I don't know. I haven't heard that term.
But anyway, I think there's a push there because the Methodist minister who married his son,
Yeah.
who was gay, and then got fired or taken off the ordained ministry list, was supported by many other clergy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's changing, but it's going to be slow.
Well, I don't know if anybody else is saying, but I think the Black church in the movie represented a place where the community came together and discussed a lot of issues, and it was a natural focal point for the civil rights movement to organize. I mean, that was like the community for Black people in the South and for us still to this day in Baltimore, and I think in Vermont, the church might not be as prominent, but I think there's a lot of community in Vermont, and so if you're looking to organize around things, maybe it's the farmers markets or the co-ops or
GMOs.
But not just the issues, but people aren't living in isolation. People do get together for things, and so can integrate with the normal cultural interactions and community. And just, I guess, recognize that those are important for when there are causes to fight for as well.
An interesting film, if folks want to experience more about how homophobia or homosexuality is considered in the African American community. There's a film called Tongues Untied, and it's quite powerful.
Essex Hemphill.
Yeah, very rare.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah, amazing film.
And before we wrap up, I will just make one plug and then also ask a question. And the plug is for the last in the series of the LGBTQ book discussion series is going to be on Monday, June 9th. The book is called Transforming Families, and it's an edited collection of essays that are written by people who have loved ones who are transgender. So either a spouse, a parent, a sibling, what have you, just a collection of essays. And so that will be the discussion, 7 p.m. in this room. You don't have to read the book. In fact, the library is going to have select essays photocopied and available to borrow because the book is, I guess it's pretty pricey. And so to prevent the library budget from bursting, or to have people go to Amazon to get the book, we're going to photocopy some essays. So I wanted to mention that. And the other thing is, this year it was a 4-book series. Next year we're looking at possibly doing 2 books and 2 films. So if anyone has a film that you particularly think would be good for such a series, please let me know. I just heard Tongues Untied. Bear in mind, though, that the film, if you do recommend one, we can only go down the road if it doesn't require permissions. So I understand there are many documentaries that are available that don't have serious hurdles to get over to be shown. So if you have a moment afterwards and want to suggest something, that would be great.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.